it's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. So it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than game time decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Off of the combine this weekend, there's been lots of anonymous sources and position coaches and all these things that sat down in interviews with him. A lot of teams allegedly don't see him as a first-round pick.
Their big mouth that thinks they can do it either. They're embarrassing themselves. They all think they're so smart, everybody in this business. You're all a bunch of drips. Honestly, you don't know who's going anywhere.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome to hour number 2, live right here on this Wednesday morning on the early line on SportsGrid. He is Donnie Right Side. I am Ben Stevens. Really in full on this Wednesday. Conference tournament week tips off. Every high major league will at least begin their conference tournament action as of Wednesday. We're already underway in the ACC and the Big 12. We got some big-time programs playing on the second day in Charlotte. North Carolina needs to start its magical March run. Iowa State trying to find its groove. Now hopefully healthy for their postseason march here in the month that bears that name. Big East, Big Ten, SEC, opening round games on this Wednesday afternoon as well. So DRS, let's just keep it rolling as we look at the SEC tournament odds once again. Auburn is that favorite, plus 145. Florida, a trendy pick at plus 270. Of course, Alabama is the 3 seed. Tennessee is the 4, plus 460, plus 650. Is there a team, really, you could talk about the top 4, even outside of Auburn if you would like, or maybe with a deeper price because of how stacked the Southeastern Conference is, you think could make a run in what we expect to be the most highly anticipated and competitive SEC men's tourney we have ever seen?
The one thing that you do like, and maybe you can hang your hat on, because you see it every single year, Ben, this includes March Madness as well. You don't get home court advantage in these. It's neutral site, which means new shooting lanes, new arenas, new hotels, and big-time added pressure because it's no longer, hey, we lost on a Tuesday. No big deal. We'll get them back on a Saturday at home when we have another game in conference play. Right. You go home at that point. And granted, the teams that we're talking about, the Auburns, the Floridas, the Alabamas, they lose this game, they're still going to March Madness, but there's a lot of pride on the line, and also seeding is on the line for March Madness where you want to win. But the reason I'm bringing this up is I do like to lean on defense in these environments because we've seen games so many times already this year, games played in the 40s, into the 50s here. Bring your defense with you. Shot making is not always going to be there to back you up, and defense always travels, and that is true. So a team like Tennessee, that for me seems to just win ugly, but they are the best overall defensive team in the SEC, and you see that price point up there at a plus 650 price. If you're not just head hunting the best teams there, like Kentucky, pure shot making 20-1. Don't defend the lick. So what's the first thing that typically goes? Like, yeah, your defense needs to be there. And if it's not, you better hope all of your three balls are going down, and they're not. It's a nice price at 20-1. It's flashy, but I don't think that's enough substance for me. Maybe it's just a team like smaller down there, Tennessee, which isn't a long shot, but you know they're going to play good defense on night to night here.
Yes, they certainly are, Donnie. And the Vols right now are a team that ranks 5th in KenPom. I started doing some research yesterday because of how stacked this field is going to be, certainly on the one line or near the top of the field of 68. There are 5 teams currently with an overall net rating on KenPom of 30 plus 30 or better, showing you they are really good basketball teams. It would match 2015 for the most 5 at a plus 30 or better we have seen in the last 2 decades of the NCAA tournament, pre-tournament. And Donnie, 4 of those 5 teams, Duke, Auburn, Houston, Florida, at a plus 34.5 net rating or better. That would be the most we have ever seen. Auburn and Florida fit that category as well. And one of the great things I would say, Donnie, about how stacked the SEC is, our opening round quadruple header today in Nashville is solid. Arkansas needs to keep stacking up the wins to solidify that tournament resume. 1 p.m. Eastern time, 4.5-point favorite against South Carolina. Vandy should be in, but basically in a pick'em against Texas. Really intriguing game between Georgia and Oklahoma, and Mississippi State plays LSU. LSU, not great this year. Just 1 point on the Bulldogs. To me, slightly fraudulent. When they get to their next game, more than likely knocking off the Bayou Bengals today, I'm going to fade the crap out of them as they take on Missouri in what we expect to be a high-scoring affair. But that's important as well. Not just picking the tournament title winner who gets to Saturday and Sunday in Nashville to be in the semifinal, to be in that championship game, but knowing on a day-to-day basis, game-by-game basis, the stakes in the NCAA tourney implications as well. Same story, DRS, in the Big Ten. Opening round action today from Indianapolis. 18-team league. 3 did not make it. Nebraska, Penn State, and Washington will not be in Indy this week and weekend. But some really good games that will feature tournament teams on this Wednesday afternoon as well. And, of course, the team booked as the favorite to win the tournament title is Michigan State, the team that won the regular season conference crown with a 3-game advantage. They are the 1 seed, Maryland now the 2, Wisconsin not with the double bye after a disastrous loss at home in Madison against the Nittany Lions over the weekend. Purdue and Illinois also not in the double bye. UCLA and Michigan will get a bye until Friday in the quarterfinal round, and yet you see some pretty hefty prices, plus 750 on the Bruins, 16-1 on the Wolverines, who are leaking oil, dropping 3 big ones in a row when they were in the chase for that Big Ten title.
It's a good conference. That's why KenPom has it ranked 2nd overall, and there's a reason for that. Look at 6 teams. It's plus 750 or less. Usually it's 2 teams, 3 teams, and then the real shelf falls off. You don't have that here. And even if you take a look at Michigan and Oregon, quality opponents here on a neutral court. So I do think it's up in the air. If I'm looking for a team that I say, you know what, because I do think Michigan State is the best team here. If you're talking about a team that can win in March and win on the road and win in a neutral site, they hand you that because they play good offense and very, very good defense and not over-reliant on the 3-point shot. But when we talk about being over-reliant on the 3-point shot, you can get hot, man. Who's the best offense in that conference? It's Purdue. Look at their 3-point shooting as a team in conference play, 38%. And then you flip it over and say, well, Donnie, they're not a great defensive team, but also understand this. They defend the 3-point shot really well. So if you're just saying Michigan State's the best, you want to take that plus 340 price, that's a great price, and it's probably the right way to go. But if you want to extend yourself just a little bit down to 7-1 and say, hey, if Purdue, who's very good and efficient on offense, hits their 3-point shot consistently and then defends the 3-point line, why not a team like Purdue? But I do think Michigan State, deservedly so, is the favorite, and it's a wide open competition in the Big Ten.
It really is, DRS. And Michigan State is kind of the benefactor, perhaps, of where their bracket is. They will get the winner of tomorrow's first game on Thursday between Indiana and Oregon, 2 tournament teams more than likely. But Michigan State will still be favored in that matchup. If they can get to semifinal Saturday, we'll see who they take on. UCLA is the 4 seed. Wisconsin, a team obviously looked on very favorably, could be that matchup against the Spartans. the bottom half of the bracket is most compelling to me. Illinois is on an absolute tear right now, looking like the Illini team with all the talent in Champaign we anticipated before this season got started, and they add back a great big in Marez Johnson Jr., who was dealing with a wrist injury, now makes his way back for Illinois. Maryland is the 2 seed. They're at the bottom of the bracket. Michigan, the 3. Again, the Wolverines, maybe by hook or crook, they had won 9 consecutive games decided by 4 points or fewer. Now they've lost 3 straight. Purdue would see Michigan on Friday. Illinois would see Maryland on Friday. There's a good chance, DRS, those 2 teams you see there with the prices for the Illini and the Boilermakers, plus 750 for Illinois, plus 700 for Purdue. They met in that regular season finale on Friday night. They could be meeting up in the semifinals on Saturday in what would be a great, great game. I think both of those teams present you some value in the Big Ten tourney.
I mean, wide open. Like, what do we usually see the favorite? Like, hey, plus 110, minus money prices, so many of these lower level conferences here where you have one of the best teams in the country, Michigan State, at a plus 340 price because of how talented the rest of this group is. And anybody on a given night, hey, Michigan State got knocked off by Illinois. Is that going to, like, floor you on a neutral court? No. So many teams can win this. This is probably one of those tournaments really to keep your eye on because you can go down the list and find great value at close to 10-1. That's hard to do in a lot of the other conferences.
Yes, it certainly is, DRS. I'll tell you my best bet for Big Ten tournament day number 1, the nightcap, USC and Rutgers, first half over. We'll get that number. We're going over. I bet you that. We'll continue to talk the Big East tournament next.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that ring. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
Just a little flyer, couple of 18.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Not far away from us, just a couple of blocks at the world's most famous arena on this Wednesday. The Big East Men's Tournament is set to begin. And of course, when you think of Madison Square Garden this year, you think of the revival of the Red Storm and what Rick Pitino has done for St. John's, their first outright Big East regular season crown since 1985. They will enter the Big East tourney as that number 1 seed, and the favorites, Donnie, at a plus 130 price. The 2 seed is Creighton at plus 420. The 3 seed, that would be our 2-time reigning national champions, the Connecticut Huskies, at a plus 390 number. Going to be a compelling week in the Big Apple at the world's most famous arena. How do you break down the Big East tournament?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be St. John's, and you see the price point there, plus 130. We just talked about a great Michigan State team at that plus 350 price number here at the FanDuel Sportsbook. UConn, obviously the pedigree there. You take a look at Creighton as well, Marquette. I just don't have the same juice here. Look, I love St. John's. I love the season that they're having. I just wish we had more bell cows in this conference where the superstar teams are coming out. Because you see Villanova being really good, 11-9 in conference play, probably going to have to run the table and win it. Will they get a victory today? Absolutely. I'm banking on that. But Marquette, Connecticut, Creighton, to me, just average basketball teams. You're just waiting for St. John's just to do what they did in the regular season, was play unbelievable, fanatically good defense and convert on offense where they just don't go dormant from the three-point line, and that should be enough. The one thing that we do know is, teams like Connecticut and teams like Villanova, and typically in the Big East, teams are slow. St. John's really isn't that slow. They're actually the highest tempo team in conference play. So I'm rooting for St. John's. I do have a nostalgia for the Big East, but to me, this tournament, if we're looking at some of the bigger conferences, lower down on my totem pole for these tournaments, Ben.
Donnie, what's so fascinating about both the Johnnies and the Spartans? They play a similar brand of basketball perceived. They are ruthless defensively. They will get up in your face. They won't give you any space whatsoever. And they're not great offensively, overly efficient, or a great three-point shooting team, either St. John's or MSU. But you would think that, all right, what are they playing at? The pace of Virginia, the pace of St. Mary's, the pace of Tennessee? No, they're getting up and down the floor, so that can also lead to total. Just know that from an idea of an over-under. When you look at things based off tempo, don't just think, oh, great defensive team, this game is staying under. More than likely, if they're playing great defense, there's going to be a limited amount of offense, but not just because of how they do things stylistically. I really do like St. John's in terms of how their bracket lays out. But because Marquette stumbled down the stretch and they lose to the Johnnies in Milwaukee in that overtime thriller and Zuby Ejiofor, the buzzer beater on Saturday afternoon, the Golden Eagles fall all the way back to the 5 seed. That means 5-seeded Marquette, 4-seed Xavier in one of the games tomorrow afternoon in the quarterfinals. The winner of that game in the semis will get St. John's against the winner of Butler and Providence. That is the first game today inside MSG at 4 p.m. Eastern. Donnie, there is a thought. Again, it is a new season. UConn did not have a terrible season. UConn didn't really have a national championship hangover. But, of course, Dan Hurley's Huskies were not quite as dominant as they have been in large part the last 2 years. But just know, UConn didn't win the Big East tournament back in 2023 either. UConn did not go 17-3 through the Big East. They were 13-7 that year. I believe a 14-6 mark, if I am not mistaken, for UConn in the Big East this time around. And you can kind of discard any disappointment from 30-plus games in the regular season when you play your best basketball in the postseason. And that's what Dan Hurley's Huskies have done each of the past 2 years. They are a trendy pick right now with that second best price, Donnie, to make a run inside MSG this week.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teams have that run in them here. And again, we're talking about St. John's, who we do think is the clear-cut champions of this league, as noted by the regular season. They also keep in mind at a quote-unquote neutral court at Madison Square Garden, where they will have the fans whipped up into a frenzy, which you used to say, oh, St. John's is used to playing at the Garden, but not necessarily a full Garden. Like, the Garden now has been rocking because why St. John's is good again. That's going to add to the level of when St. John's takes the court and say, man, they're playing Marquette, who is 1,000 miles away from their campus. That's going to be a big advantage for them, and that's why you're giving them the nod. And, of course, that's why that price is so low at a plus 130. I do think they're the best there, but you're right about this. You take a look at teams like Connecticut. The pedigree is there. Maybe the defense isn't all there, but the offense certainly is there to put up a good run here. And also Connecticut does have a very good fan base, and Connecticut usually invades the Garden as well. You end up with a Connecticut-St. John's game. That is going to be unbelievable theater at Madison Square Garden. But I sort of take a look a little bit lower, like the Marquettes at the 6-1. Give me the team that can play good defense. Give me the team that's good on offense. And I actually thought Marquette would knock off St. John's in the final game of the season when St. John's was on the road to take on Marquette. So if I'm looking for a non-St. John's tickets for me, I probably look at Marquette in this to be my B option for the Big East tournament.
And Donnie, there's a great chance that Marquette opens up with a game already against Xavier tomorrow afternoon around 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Great game there. The Musketeers have found their footing. They are trying to make sure they can stay on the right side of the NCAA tournament bubble. A win against Marquette on a neutral floor would be a quad one victory tomorrow. That would be huge for Sean Miller and Xavier. But if Marquette does win that game, we would expect they are going to be favored to do so. They'll take on St. John's on semifinal Friday. The winner of that to the championship game. Bottom half of the bracket, Connecticut and Creighton more than likely in the semifinals. But before we get there, Villanova, 18-1 price. Nova would have to win the Big East tournament to earn the automatic bid to the Big Dance. If they do not, year number 3 under Kyle Neptune will end in failure once again. And could that be the end of the Kyle Neptune era already on the main line? Villanova today in the nightcap at Madison Square Garden. 11.5-point favorite against a bad Seton Hall team. Should win that game comfortably for a matchup tomorrow, Donnie. That would also be a raucous environment inside the Garden against UConn.
Yes, and Villanova will win their game against Seton Hall today and will play UConn. It's just a shame on the season. You're right about Kyle Neptune. When you look at organizations, and I call them organizations now because the players are getting paid to play, Villanova's on a slippery slope, man. Like you had Jay Wright in Villanova, a small campus school that was rolling. He got the guys in there that you needed. The longer you get away from Jay Wright without success, the harder it is to bring that program back.
Nova has not made the tournament, of course, each of the previous 2 seasons.
Can't have that.
Is on track to miss for a 3rd straight year. Other conference tournaments starting today. Next.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
Rearranging that roof. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
Just a little flyer, couple of 15.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid, we get you set for every single conference tournament that begins today. Conference tournament week in a really good spot as of this moment. We have hit on all the big boys. All 5 high major leagues have either begun or will begin in just a matter of hours their conference tournament this week. Donnie, let's get to a couple of mid-major conferences that are only mid-major maybe in designation, but play some great basketball. And a very compelling championship race in many of them. Teams that you know, players that you have heard of, games you have watched, but still maybe only one-bid leagues at this moment. In the American, Memphis is trying to avoid a bid stealer. Everybody looking at the AAC is hoping that a team like UAB or North Texas doesn't take it from the Tigers. Memphis a plus 105 price. Same in the A10. Atlantic 10 tourney starting today in Brooklyn inside the Barclays Center. VCU minus 110. The Rams, would they be an at-large consideration if they do not win the A10 tourney? Probably. But again, trying to avoid all of those bid stealers. Very compelling Mountain West Conference tournament this week, DRS. New Mexico, led by Rick's son, Richard Pitino. Their first conference crown in more than a decade. They won the conference tournament last year, but many teams hoping for big wins to maybe get on the right side of the bubble, like the 2-seed Colorado State and Boise State as well. If you have not watched UC San Diego and Eric Olin this year, the Tritons, one of the best teams that you will see. A team that maybe on the 12 line, 13 line, will make some noise in the big dance. Minus 185 to win the Big West tournament title. And in the MEAC, Norfolk State, a minus money favorite with a slight price at minus 110. Donnie, of those 5 on your screen, which one do you like the most? Which one might be the most compelling?
Yeah, UC San Diego is a fun team. I mean, they're one of those teams that you were watching late night here. They smash teams they're supposed to smash. Like one of those teams ultra efficient on offense, but I always have an affinity for the A10. I like the depth of that conference. You take a look at VCU, George Mason, Dayton, Loyola Chicago, St. Joe's, St. Louis, as well as St. Bonaventure, and also George Washington, all at 500 or better. So crazy things do happen. Now, VCU, are they the best team in this conference? Yes, they are. Best offensive efficiency, and by a wide margin, but sometimes that doesn't really carry through. But you know what you lean on? The best overall defense in conference play, which is also VCU. If you're looking a little bit down the list, maybe it's a Dayton that might be able to catch them, but there's a lot of teams here that you could catch them on an off night. But for me, it's probably going to be VCU. Look at them at the minus 110 price, and then UC San Diego at minus 185. Probably the clearest path to victory for both of those teams.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, DRS. And when you look at some of those prices, really, minus 185 for the Tritons and Eric Olin might seem like a lot, but to Donnie's point, not just one of the best teams in college basketball, a Kent Palm rating within the top 35, but also the best cover team in college basketball all year long. They are going to be booked as a hefty favorite in basically every conference tournament game they have, 23-7 against the spread for UC San Diego this season. Again, A10 and AAC at this moment, just one bid leagues, expecting said conference tournament winner and favorite, Memphis and VCU, to do just that. Dayton, a part of Joe Lunardi's most recent bracketology, as the next 4 out, so not even a part of the first 4 out, despite the Flyers with a great run in Maui earlier this year. Still on the outside looking in. And in the Mountain West, 3 tournament teams at this moment. The regular season champs in the Lobos from New Mexico, San Diego State and Brian Dutcher. And, of course, Utah State, a 25-win team as of this moment. But teams like the Broncos of Boise State and the Rams of Colorado State, Donnie, trying to play their way in to the big dance with a big week, I believe, in Las Vegas.
Yeah, there's the haves and the have-nots out in the Mountain West. I mean, you take a look at the top of those standings here, like New Mexico, 17-3, Colorado State, 16-4, Utah State, 15-5, San Diego State, 14-6, Boise State, 14-6, then UNLV still above 500, and Nevada just below 500 at that point. So one of those, again, conferences that you look at those price points and say, you might be able to slide down just a little bit and not pull a major upset because these teams have been battling all season long. Utah State, fantastic on offense. New Mexico, fantastic on defense. You always know that San Diego State is going to bring the defense here. It's a fun conference that doesn't get a lot of play on the East Coast because of the times that they play late at night, but a fun conference nonetheless. And it not a top-heavy conference. That is a balanced conference outside of teams like all the way down with Fresno State and Air Force.
CSU pulled off the stunner against Boise State in Boise on Saturday night to claim that 2 seed. Because of it, the Broncos fall to the 5 line. Nick Clifford, Colorado State, a team that made it to the NCAA tournament a year ago. Really, really stout squad. Mark Zinno joins the show next.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that roof. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
Couple 18.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Mark Zinno joins us bright and early live right here on this Wednesday morning with a little bit of everything. We'll talk some NFL free agency with Zinno right now. The Mouth in the South will return for an SEC tournament preview that begins on this Wednesday in our next segment. And then some more college basketball handicaps and thoughts from Mark Zinno as conference tournament week all around the nation fully gets underway on this Wednesday. Zinno, as always, we appreciate the time. Thanks for being here.
Ben, it is timely that I am here, and it is wonderful to be here every single week.
We're very glad to have you here, Zinno. Perfectly on time all the time. Let's talk some NFL free agency as well. At any time, Zinno, you're talking free agency and moves made around the NFL. Quarterbacks are going to dominate the headlines and be our focus first and foremost. So as we have seen quarterbacks already signed so far in this free agency frenzy, we have seen Sam Darnold go to Seattle, an opening in the Northwest because the Seahawks on Friday traded away Geno Smith. Justin Fields makes his way to New York as a part of the new regime for the Jets. And yesterday, maybe a quarterback competition in Indianapolis as Daniel Jones signs a 1-year, $14 million deal with the Colts. Zinno, I'm going to ask you very specific phrasing here to get the answer. What do you think is the best move or your favorite move that has been made at the quarterback spot so far in free agency?
I mean, it's got to be Geno Smith to the Raiders, right? I mean, it's you put him back with a guy that, knows him fairly well in Pete Carroll, that sort of, helped resurrect his career a little bit. And you bring stability to a franchise at a position that hasn't really had any since Derek Carr, when John Gruden was there. Like that's really how long it's been for the Raiders to show that they are a team that can have stability at the quarterback position. So I think it's a good fit. Clearly, Geno can play. I mean, my definition of a franchise quarterback is a guy that starts for you every single game and shows up and puts up good numbers and helps you win ball games. Geno Smith has done that. He's a franchise quarterback by definition, and a franchise quarterback doesn't mean that they win your Super Bowls or they get you to the playoffs every year. It just means that they make you competitive and viable. That's kind of what Geno Smith has done. So it's got to be Geno to Las Vegas.
I'm on the opposite end of that one. Like, I think that Sam Darnold going to Seattle for less money than Geno's going to get and giving up a draft pick for a team that's floundering on Las Vegas. We can go over that. But let me ask you this question, too. Let's look at some of the free agents that actually signed there on the list, because Geno by trade, Sam Darnold goes to Seattle. Forget about those. The focus today, like the news coming down for Indianapolis, was basically Daniel Jones is coming in. This wasn't a 1 year, $4.5 million deal where they go, you're the backup just in case something goes wrong. They gave him escalators in that contract, Mark. They could pay him close to $17.5 million if he winds up the starter. Give us your take on Anthony Richardson, the Colts, and now Daniel Jones.
Well, look, I mean, the Colts kind of were in a spot where it wasn't favorable. They had to sign another viable starter because, remember, last year at one point, Anthony Richardson said, you know what, I'm good. I don't want to play anymore. I need to take a break. Probably not a reliable position to be in when your quarterback who is willing to sit down, the guy you drafted 4th overall, goes, you know what, I need a little bit of a break. I'm good. So they needed to find somebody who can be competitive at that position, not somebody who just come in, hold a clipboard and say, oh, God, if something happens to our starter, then we'll call you. Otherwise, we're going to forget your name for the next 2 months. No, that's not the case here. So, but the idea of a Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson quarterback battle, I mean, you know, it's kind of just, you know, I don't know that you're going to see any high-level quarterback play at all. All I know is this. You'll see a lot of errant passes. Literally everybody in Indianapolis will be catching strays, as in one ball goes this way, another ball goes this way. It's just strays all over the place. So, this should be fun for the Colts.
Indianapolis has some talent elsewhere along the roster. They have let a couple of offensive linemen already go throughout this free agency period. Will Fries signing a big deal yesterday to go to Minnesota. A lot is already happening for the Colts that doesn't seem overly optimistic for Shane Steichen entering year number 3. Zinno, at the bottom of that list in the quarterback carousel, two intriguing teams still making decisions, if you will. The Giants, TBD. The Steelers, TBD. And still 2 very big-name quarterback candidates out there on the open market. Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Let's start with Aaron Rodgers. Where do you think he plays his football in 2025?
I mean, if he wants to win and cares about, you know, going out with some semblance of a, you know, punctuation, you know, exclamation point, punctuation at the end of his career, he goes to Pittsburgh. If he wants to boss people around and mess with the New York media and make a bad team just slightly better than a bad team, well, then the Giants are calling. At least you don't have to move addresses, right? Because you're still playing in the same building. So there is that. But, I mean, these Steelers are interesting. I'm morbidly curious as a coach that I know really well in Arthur Smith, what Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers would be like in the same room. I love Arthur Smith as a coach, and I like him as a man. I think he's a great dude. But he is the smartest guy in the room. And don't tell Aaron Rodgers that he's not the smartest guy in the room. I would love to see how that relationship works out between the two of them. The fireworks coming out of Pittsburgh would be something interesting that Mike Tomlin might actually force Mike Tomlin to retire, but neither here nor there. So, look, I would add one more sort of nugget into this quarterback carousel here, guys. We now sit here Wednesday, March 12th. It is the official start of the new league year. The Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins need to find a way to separate. They owe him $10 million coming up in 4 days, which I don't think they're excited about having to pay, although the team says they are, quote, comfortable with him on the roster this year. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, I could be comfortable riding on a bicycle with no seat, but I just don't feel like doing it because it's not where I want to go. So there is a divorce here that could be pending with a post-June 1st designation and possibly him heading to a place like the New York Giants, or from other reports saying that the Cleveland Browns may take Kirk Cousins. So I would add that that's still although at a small percentage, still a possibility before we get to March 16th when Kirk Cousins is due $10 million.
Yeah, the hilarious part about that too is like they would pay him the $10 million and say, "See, we're serious about keeping him on our roster." And then a couple weeks later, like, you called our bluff here. We're going to cut him, and it cost us $10 million, and we're going to eat that massive cap hit on top of it. I mean,
that
that's
would be the most
like.
Falcons thing ever. Yes, that's exactly. It's a poorly run organization at the top. I don't think anybody would debate that.
By the way, if we do look at, smartest men in the room, some would figure that it would be Howie Roseman of the Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody leaving the building. Not too many players coming into the building. So when we take a look at the Super Bowl odds for next year, trust in Howie still is big because the FanDuel Sportsbook says plus 650 for the Philadelphia Eagles to win a back-to-back Super Bowl championship, followed by the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, the Lions, and the 49ers. If we look at that list here, is there any panic or is there any team that you go, you know what? They made really good moves here. I want to buy into that squad.
Well, first, don't underscore the fact that Ben Stevens thought you were talking about him when you said the smartest guy in the room. Noticeably for Ben, though, he's the only person in that room. So therefore, by default, he is the smartest person in that room. So there is that. Do I want to back the Eagles? Really, this number hasn't changed simply because you still have Jalen Hurts and you still have Saquon Barkley, right? So like everything else is sort of negotiable with Philadelphia, and the general thought is that they'll still be a team that you can bet on to win the whole thing. Still find it interesting that the Chiefs are the second favorite. If anybody didn't notice real quick, can I just throw this out there totally away from Super Bowl odds? The Chargers got infinitely better this offseason. And I will absolutely be firing on the Chargers to win the AFC West this year. I'll do it again. I will do it again. I mean, that is coming down the road. So write it down. You heard it here first. Save the tape. We can mark it down on March 12th, first day of the league year. Zinno told you the Chargers are winning the AFC West this year. That is the bet to make.
9 consecutive AFC West titles for Kansas City. Will they finally be able to be knocked off the perch? Mark Zinno is back in the Bolts. The Chargers have made some very shrewd moves this offseason, continuing to build the organization in the footprint of Jim Harbaugh. I'm surprised you didn't mention the Buffalo Bills at that plus 750 price after the acquisition of Joey Bosa, Joshua Palmer. Some good moves for the Bills to pay Josh Allen. Hey, you never know. All right, Mouth in the South, get ready. It's SEC Tourney time next.
It's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. So it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Off of the combine this weekend, there's been lots of anonymous sources and position coaches and all these things that sat down in interviews with him. A lot of teams allegedly don't see him as a first-round pick.
Their big mouth that thinks they can do it either. They're embarrassing themselves. They all think they're so smart, everybody in this business. You're all a bunch of drips. Honestly, you don't know who's going anywhere.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Now time to break down some college basketball with the mouth in the South, and maybe the most highly anticipated SEC men's basketball tournament we have ever seen. Starts today with 4 games on a Wednesday in Music City. To Nashville, Tennessee we go, and the mouth in the South, Mark Zinno, is here to break it all down. Zinno, let's talk big picture first. SEC tournament title odds at this moment. No surprise, Auburn is the favorite at plus 145. But do you go to the top with the Tigers, or do you look somewhere else in that board for maybe just a tad more value?
I mean, I lean on Florida here. It's not only from a value perspective. I just think they're the best team. When you look at both ends of the floor, and that's not a disrespect to Auburn and where they are, but I don't know that Florida isn't primed to win this tournament, given the way they've played, and they seem to be getting better as the season goes along, right? They're playing probably the best version of their own basketball now, more so than ever. And so I like Florida at plus 270. I don't really give anybody else a shot. Like Tennessee, I think if their defense is on point, certainly could make it life difficult for every other team. They would need to play 3 straight really stout defensive games. How much better is their defense, or how consistent is their defense away from Knoxville? We haven't really seen a good picture of that so far this year. They've struggled a little bit on the road. Does the neutral site game mean on the road? I don't know, but we'll find out. But I think Tennessee probably is the other place I'd look, just because their defense is that much better than everybody else's.
It's a good point that you bring up, too, because you take a look at some of the best offenses in the country, according to Ken Pom. You got 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Only one difference there, as I assume it's probably Duke at number 2 overall. Usually when I look at neutral site court and you play, let's just say, in the SEC, which is an unbelievable conference, do you rely more on defense? Because it's true that Tennessee is the best defensive team in the country, and they still do have a quality offense on that end. Do you look more offensively or defensively when you're picking neutral courts here, or does it matter to you at that point?
I mean, look, for all intents and purposes, you use the same exact method used for 6 games in March, right? It's guard play and defense, right? If you have those 2 things, then you have a chance to make a run through any tournament, right? Whether it's conference tournament or the NCAA tournament. And that's what Tennessee really excels at, right? They got great guard play, and they play great defense. So I think Tennessee's offense at times can look a little bit lackluster, but remember, Tennessee's pace is so dreadfully slow that, you know, it sort of can make their offense look not as good as what it really is. It's still efficient, but they're just not pushing the pace, and because they're willing to slow things down, you're not going to get a lot of points scored. That brings a little bit of variance in when it comes into, you know, beating better teams. I just think that Tennessee, you know, again, for them, it's about game script. And if they can control the other team from the outset and they do it in the first 20 minutes, guess what? They're going to have a great chance to do it for a full 40 minutes because they know what works against whoever they're playing, and they stick with it.
The Vols have a great backcourt, led by their veteran point guard in Zakai Ziegler, the North Florida transfer in Chaz Lanier as well. We'll talk a little bit more SEC tournament with some of the opening round games in just a moment with Mark Zinno. But let's talk beyond conference tournament action as well. We are now in the postseason, firmly in the month of March. Zinno, you're looking at Florida this week in Nashville. Is your outlook for success in the big dance also highest for the Gators in that spot?
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the 4 teams that I have circled that can win this whole thing. You know, along with Duke.
Oh, you tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's Florida, Duke. You know, for me at this point, at the top of it. You know, I would give a nod. Yeah, I know you counting for me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
1 of 4.
Outside of Florida, Duke. I mean, Houston is going to get my attention. 100% they are. And as crazy as it sounds, I know they haven't been playing well as of late. I still kind of believe this Wisconsin team can make a lot of noise in this tournament. I mean, wasn't going to leave a Big Ten team out, you know, but nonetheless, I know that they've kind of stunk it up down the stretch and they don't look good, but the way they shoot and the amount of defense they play is enough for me. And, you know, I think Wisconsin can win the Big Ten tournament, you know, give themselves a favorable seed and a favorable run. But those are the 4 teams I'm kind of looking at here for the NCAA tournament to win the whole entire thing.
Taking a look there at the SEC itself, because we do see the odds, Final Four and championship odds, like down that list. Is there a team that could have lightning in a bottle, Mark, that you're saying, you know what, I think we're undervaluing this team coming into not only the SEC tournament, but into March Madness as well? A team like Kentucky, which is real fluid on offense, doesn't play great defense, but does have the pedigree to make big shots here. Give us a team in the SEC to watch out for, maybe halfway down the ranks there.
I mean, I still have to lean on Alabama, right? Like, they can force you out of your game so quickly because of the way they play. They can easily make another run to the Final Four. Like, you guys are both scratching your heads and making faces, but at the end of the day,
I'm scratching my head because Donnie said halfway down the ranks, not the team with the fifth best price to win a national championship. That's why I'm scratching my head.
Okay.
Halfway down
give me a
that
little
list,
Kentucky,
sure,
Missouri,
but not.
Mississippi State.
No, okay.
Yeah.
The answer is no. Kentucky and Texas A&M do not have a chance to win the national title.
All right.
They're both severely flawed teams. Tennessee, do you want to continue to invest your money into Rick Barnes in Tennessee only to watch it go up in flames? It's the same thing. It's like, remember we talked about, I will not bet the Ravens' future to win a Super Bowl. I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to give Tennessee my money again, only to watch it go up in flames. So I've kind of just have learned my lesson and sworn off them. Can they win it? Yes, I think theoretically they can, but they wouldn't get my money. If you're asking me who I would put a wager on, I'm sorry, it's not halfway down the list. It's just above halfway down the list. Alabama would be the team that I'd look at. They still can get to the Final Four again. I think that's certainly viable given where they are and how they play.
Okay, I'm fine with it. Just when you look at those odds, I know it's a little bit difficult because we have the six best teams out of the SEC. Four of those six best prices, though, to win a national championship: Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee. Quickly, Zinno, before we move on to other conference tournaments, opening round today in Nashville. Any team, any game, any bet you like the most?
Hammer it with the Hogs. South Carolina, when these two teams played last week, South Carolina did things on offense they haven't done in 10 years. They shot 47% from the field, 35% from three. This is a huge revenge spot for the Razorbacks here. South Carolina ain't pulling off this feat twice.
And you would think that John Calipari and his Razorbacks need to avoid any potential upset to stay firmly into the NCAA tournament field. Even if Cal says he doesn't care about the conference tournament, they should today in the opener. Big 12 or Big East, Big 10 next.
It's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. So it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Off of the combine this weekend, there's been lots of anonymous sources and position coaches and all these things that sat down in interviews with him. A lot of teams allegedly don't see him as a first-round pick.
Their big mouth that thinks they can do it either. They're embarrassing themselves. They all think they're so smart, everybody in this business. You're all a bunch of drips. Honestly, you don't know who's going anywhere.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid, we continue to handicap each and every high major college basketball tournament during conference tournament week. Now we go from the SEC, where Mark Zinno just goes back to the guy from Long Island, Mark Zinno, to look at the Madison Square Garden action that we have this week in the Big East tourney. Mark Zinno grew up loving St. John's, absolutely adoring what he saw from Chris Mullen, Mark Jackson, everybody playing for the Red Storm in the mid-'80s. Yes, certainly Chris Mullen gets some love on this show. And Zinno, when we look at the Big East tournament title odds right now, St. John's winning their first outright title since your childhood in the mid-'80s, 1985, is that one seed in the Big East tournament and is the short favorite at plus 130. Will Rick Pitino and the Red Storm take Madison Square Garden by storm this week in the Big East tournament?
I hope so. I mean, look, if they end up winning the Big East, depending on how the rest of it shakes out, there may be an argument for them to be definitively a 2 seed. And if things go a different way, might even have a chance to be the last 1 seed in. Maybe if some things fall their way. I don't think that's totally out of the realm of possibility. That said, probably not a lot of value betting there. That UConn number is disgusting. Like, they should not be the second favorite. Like, that is a joke. That is an absolute laughable joke. Do not put your money on UConn to win this thing. It is a waste of it. The team that I would focus on that's not St. John's is the Creighton Blue Jays. Ryan Kalbrunner in the middle will be a matchup nightmare for a lot of teams. They still can shoot really well. They play a lot of defense. I mean, they have the ability to be the one team that could play a similar style to what St. John's does, and they just have a huge advantage in the middle with Kalbrunner that could be very hard to guard. And if you get some of the St. John's big men in trouble, I think they could create a difficult situation for them. So as much as we want to give deference to UConn for being a 2-time defending national champion, it's a joke that they have the second best odds. Creighton and Marquette are better teams than UConn, and they would beat them.
Yeah, if we take a look at that Big East too, like St. John's, a good offensive team, fast tempo offensive team. If they can get some 3-point shooting, nobody's probably going to beat them in the Big East, particularly since they have quote unquote home court advantage there. But if we do look at the Big Ten, one of the deepest conferences in college basketball, a lot of teams under 10-1 here. Michigan State at the plus 250 price, as we list it right now, down from the plus 340 price that you see on the graphic right here. Maryland, Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois, UCLA, a deep conference. Is this Michigan State's to win? And if it isn't, who's going to take the title in the Big Ten for you, Mark?
I mean, again, it's Maryland and Wisconsin would get my money just because of, how they have handled themselves this year. Remember, Michigan State beat Maryland on a last-second chuck-up 3 at the buzzer from midcourt. That game goes to overtime. I think Maryland probably wins it, especially when they were at home. And again, Wisconsin kind of hit that late-season swoon. When they played, for a team that shot better, nearly 49% all year long. They shot 33% against Michigan State on the road. And 15% from 3. I don't think those numbers would hold up in a rematch here. So Maryland and Wisconsin, I mean, I don't necessarily believe in Purdue all that much, but their offense could create problems for some of these teams. If they can get a team like Maryland and Wisconsin and Michigan State into an early hole, it may be tough for those teams to get out of. Given the style that they play, everybody on the right hand side of that bracket, set your money on fire. I wouldn't even look at the right hand side of the screen. I don't think they have any real legitimate chance. They would need other teams to not be able to leave the team hotel in order to get to the semifinals, let alone the finals in this thing. So it's a 3-team race: Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin. That's probably the way I'd go.
Wisconsin would take on UCLA during Big Ten quarterfinal Friday in Indianapolis. Not a bad look there. The Badgers dropped 3 of their last 5, trying to find that footing. A historic offensive season for Greg Gard and his Badgers team in Madison, hoping to replicate that this week in Indianapolis. Zinno, as you look at any of the other conference tournaments, final 40 seconds of this segment, any other teams we should be keeping an eye on? Who do you like this week?
I tell you, the only other thing I would do here is I would bet Clemson to win the ACC and then set up a hedge situation against Duke in the final, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get Clemson better than 3-1. Throw future on them right now to win the ACC tournament. And then when they face Duke, you'll have a hedge situation to be able to kind of put yourself in to get some money.
Really, that bottom half of the bracket, Clemson against Louisville. Louisville knocked off Clemson in the regular season. Who can provide that test for Duke? North Carolina starts their run in Charlotte today. Mark Zinno, as always, what a fun half an hour with you, my friend. Very timely today, as always. Donnie? More of the early line next.